Welcome everyone to a Saturday edition to the Solution Breakdown. I'm your host, Mark Baker. Let's get into it. A few things that I want to bring up. Um, One, a great win by the New York Giants. Uh, you only really needed to watch maybe about 5 minutes of that game to really get uh, the entire narrative of the New York Giants of the last 3 years. Jackson Dart is in the 10. Blue Medical 10. Brian Dable is you know, he's getting hot with medical personnel. You got Cam Scatterbo trying to go back in the tent to see what's happening. 75,000 fans there. What the hell's going to happen with this guy? He had taken a hit, but I believe by Jihad Campbell. I forget who. And so it encapsulates everything about what the New York Giants have been through since Eli Manning. And congrats to them. You have a head coach, a GM that are. I mean, if you could, I mean, it's as hot as a seat as you could imagine. I mean, you could tell if you could tell me what like visualize a coach on the sideline who's currently on the hot seat. And you see Brian Dable in that moment, sitting there looking behind the bench, being like, "Oh shit, is he going to be okay?" You fall behind 1-5 at that point to an Eagles team that, we'll get to that next. That seems to be to a certain degree in shambles in terms of their team's identity. Where you lost to New Orleans on Sunday, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. And yeah, I mean, certainly Jackson Dart brings some sort of energy to this offense, and also Cam Scatterbo as well. That's another guy that I mean, I'm not a Giants fan or anything, but that's certainly that for a fan base that has been, you know, is seemingly through the ringer with Odell Beckham's nonsense, uh, Ben McAdoo, Daniel Jones. It got kind of weird. It got a little bit weird with Eli at the end. I mean, with Joe Judge being a complete flop. I mean, you guys have not. There hasn't been any reason for hope. And let's not even forget Joe Shane saying, letting Saquon Barkley go to the Eagles, and having tape of that decision making going down. That is worse. That's the worst of the worst. So you could tell the anxiety in the stadium of everything the Giants as an organization have been through in the past decade. I mean, hell, you could argue this was one of their biggest wins, essentially in the past 5 years. That like finally that we might have a guy that we can trust. I don't think anyone in their right mind, even when they made the playoffs, trusted Daniel Jones. And he's been playing well in Indy, but I don't think anyone in their right mind trusted Daniel Jones. I think most people back then 3 years ago, we sat around and said, you know what, like that was Brian Daboll. And man, they talk about a win that might have just maybe saved a coach's job. Now, would they have fired him? I'm not really sure. To say that John Mara is a little impatient at this point, yeah, it's probably an understatement. Uh, would if they would have lost this game, would you have fired Dayball? Would you have fired Joe Shane? Probably not, knowing the New York Giants and how they operate as a business. But it's a big win. If you go 7-10 as a Giants team, you go 7-10. That's hope. You have the hardest schedule, one of the hardest schedules in in the entire league. To sit there and think that you will go under 500. Now, if they had won that game in New Orleans, maybe we're talking, okay, maybe there's a shot, because we don't know. Listen, Washington had a great game in LA. After falling behind 10-0, they had a great game, but we don't really know what they're going to. Again, they're the oldest roster in the league. And by Thanksgiving, we could be talking about their roster as decimated as Detroit's roster was last year. We don't really know with Washington. But this is a big win for the Giants. This was a win more for, hey, we might not make the playoffs, probably won't, but at least we have life. So congrats to the New York Giants. Now let's go to the flip side for the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's talk about that for a second. Listen, this is the reality of the NFL. This is why, outside of in the millennium, when you think about who has repeated as champions, what do they have in common? Coach, quarterback. Coach, quarterback. I've said this before. When Kansas City repeated, they lost to the Raiders on Christmas Day at home. And I forget off the top, I think it might have been Aiden O'Connell. I think he only threw 8 passes the entire game. It's like you deal with that stuff. You deal with a lot of chaos, a lot of turmoil. In that early 2000s window when Brady and Belichick, when they won back to back in 03 and 04. They had a game in Buffalo, I think it was early in 2003, where they had lost 31-0. Now, again, the point I'm about to make doesn't necessarily apply for New England. But with the Eagles, it matters. It really matters. One, when you put together two factors, when you are now the hunted, and also you have not only a media market, but also a team standard of, we nothing short of picking back up or picking where we left off and winning another Super Bowl is a failure. So now you have a high standard, a highly critical media market. You have to be able to fill the gap somewhere. And there was all this talk. There was all this talk at the beginning of the year where that list came out. Man, is that back into the conversation. Jalen Hurts was 9. And we all said, Jared Goff 8? Jalen Hurts won a Super. He played well again in the Super Bowl. He's definitely better than Jared Goff. And he's way better than Baker Mayfield, which was 10. Oh, well, that got old. That got old quick. Because when we contextualize, it's easy to say in March or April or May or June or July that, oh yeah, this team is going to go and again. This team is going to go and win again. They're easily going to win it again. Welcome to the reality of the NFL. Saquon Barkley is not nearly as productive as he was last year. Now that could change. It's only 6 weeks. Then you have a receiver that now is kind of fatigued by the direction the offense is going in. You know, we forget that Philly is kind of has an old school mentality. They have an old school physical mentality. They don't care. They don't care to throw the ball 40 times, 45 times. They don't care about, overall wide receiver production. It complements their offense. It's not a necessity. Which brings me into my point is that what's going on with the Eagles? You have a bunch of things here that just aren't clicking. The defense lost some key pieces that actually more or less hurt them. Now let's back up a little bit. Jalen Carter and Quinyon Mitchell went out. Those are some big key pieces. Let's give the defense a little bit of credit. But let's not dismiss the fact that where's all the blame going to now? Where is all the blame going to? Usually the answer to the problem is not where the blame is going, but why are we putting blame on one single piece? Why are we putting all the blame on Kevin Petullo? Why is it all on him? Can you name me Kansas City's offensive coordinator? I can. I think it's Matt Nagy, former head coach of the Bears. Can you name me the offensive coordinator for the Rams? You might. How about for Tampa now? Even Seattle, that I was critical of early in the year. The point that I'm making is that at the end of the day, how about the Lions? I mean, the Lions are the biggest example of this. We had thought Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, they accepted head coaching positions. The Lions are not going to look the same. Turns out this 4-1 start actually helps us contextualize Jared Goff's career a little bit more. Maybe it's not entirely coordinator specific. Maybe it's the fact that you have an elite quarterback and an elite coach. And when you have that combination, the coordinator doesn't really have as much depth and weight. If you have a elite culture building coach and then the quarterback, it can work. It can work. We all want to talk about Petullo, but what works around the league? What's the big difference between that 03 and 04 New England team and that 22 and 23 Kansas City team? Quarterback and coach. That's it. You have an elite quarterback and elite head coach. It creates a bit of a cushion. That shockwave. That's what's gotten a little bit weird with Buffalo, is that you have the elite quarterback. Is the coach elite? He's a good coach, nonetheless. But is he to the extent of an Andy Reid, even a Dan Campbell, a Kyle Shanahan? We're sitting here and Josh Allen has been has been at the very least a playoff contender for 6 years, and they haven't reached the Super Bowl. You have to ask that question. This is a salary cap free agent league where you have to occasionally rely on cheap talent. Not to say coordinators aren't necessary. It definitely is for Kansas City. They don't win those 3 Super Bowls. Maybe they win none of them without Spags. It does matter. But we keep putting it on Patullo. But everyone told me that Jalen Hurts was elite. Jalen Hurts is elite. Everyone told me. But he's only really himself with the right coordinator. That doesn't sound elite to me. It sounds good, it sounds productive, and that even borders on great. But everyone kept telling me that, oh, he's elite. He's elite. I don't even think Jalen Hurts is definitely not a top 10 quarterback right now. I'm definitely jumping Baker Mayfield over Jalen Hurts right now. Jared Goff looks, I mean, I have to apologize because I had said, you know what, I'll put Hurts over Goff. Man, was I wrong. Man, was I wrong. And so this is the reality we're looking at with the Eagles. Is that we put it on the coordinator, but I'm not going to sit here and suggest you don't have it with Hurts, because he's certainly too talented of a player to even consider. He's shown that he can make the throws when it matters, under the right circumstances, under the right guidance, under the right tutelage. That's the guy that you want. The guy that has history. You know what you can get from this guy. Then it falls on the coach. What is this guy's shtick? Like, what is it? Like, I don't know. He's loud. He's loud. Seems like a hype guy. Like, what does this guy? What does this guy do well? He's not an X's and O's kind of guy. He's not a scheme oriented type of guy. I mean, you could argue the same with Dan Campbell. But with Dan Campbell, the highs are pretty high, but the lows aren't that low. I mean, even when they were losing, there was still a sense of, I think we might have something here. Even the lows weren't that low. The Sirianni thing is, when it's low, the lows are pretty low. The highs are pretty high, but the lows are pretty low. So, the fortunate thing for Philadelphia is that, similar to last year, you have the Vikings coming up, and you play the Giants at home. Now, we could be talking the Eagles are 6-2, and we still might be talking about it, but 6-2 sounds a lot better than 4-2 coming off of 2 losses. Sounds a lot better than that. So you're 6-2. The Eagles, what they've been fortunate with is that winning makes it all okay. It got weird last year. It got weird, and Brandon Graham had to walk back some comments. You got Sirianni yelling at fans. It got weird. But winning cures everything. But eventually, you're going to have to address this. You're going to have to address this. Because right now, does not look like a team that's going to repeat as Super Bowl champs. It's too loud. And what they were able to do, they were able to fix it on the field. But it's a little bit different this year. You're the defending champs. You're the team that everyone has it circled on their schedule. You're now the hunted. You're not the, we're going to wait for you to screw up. We're going to wait for all the dysfunction to subside, and we're going to wait for the dysfunction to really collapse in around you. And it didn't. They showed that on the field. This year's different. It's a lot different when you're now the hunted. But they have a couple very winnable games. They have Detroit coming up. But again, coach quarterback combination. If we keep talking about how he needs the right coordinator, I mean, geez, that's not sustainable for winning. Because if you have a coordinator that can get the best out of Jalen Hurts, that guy's probably going to become a head coach. So what was going to happen? Let's actually say this, right? What was going to happen if Kevin Patullo was a hit this year and the Eagles were the number one passing offense? Let's play that scenario out. He's going to become a head coach, and then you got to find another coordinator. So then you're all coordinator specific. That's not sustainable. That really isn't sustainable. Because now a lot of these guys, with the exception of some jobs, they want to go become head coaches. You need the right fit, but at times playing quarterback in this league is, what do you do when you just don't have as much around you as you once did? You can't pay, you can't pay that receiver. Running back gets hurt. O-line gets hurt. I mean, this is what's happening with the Chargers right now. What's happening with Herbert? Herbert's running for his life out there. It's the reality of the NFL. It's the reality of what sets certain guys apart from another. When you've got a stacked roster, you play well in the Super Bowl. Great. Happy for him. He earned it. Let's not forget Doug Williams played well in the Super Bowl. Joe Flacco had that great playoff run. It can happen. It can happen. Russell Wilson, we contextualize his career much different now than we did 10 years ago. 10 years ago was Russ's elite. If you would have told me Russ is going to the Hall of Fame in 2016, I wouldn't tell you. I wouldn't argue with that. Now it's probably not. Even Cam Newton 10 years ago, yeah, you would have told me he was going to the Hall of Fame. Wouldn't surprise me. Now, not really. Takes time for this stuff to it takes time. And it turns out having him at that 9th spot on that list, you know what? May have been the right place, and it might have been a little bit too high. The more we contextualize everything, the more we see it's that when it's the right coordinator, then he can win. But we saw this 2 years ago. And look at what happened. I don't want this to be about that I'm bagging on Jalen Hurts, but Listen, everyone kept telling me that he was elite. And at the end of the day, you know, Brady won a Super Bowl with Byron Leftwich as his OC. It's not like that guy is a is a head coach somewhere. And I know obviously to compare someone to Brady is a little bit too much. I understand. But this is the reality of the NFL. Coaches leave, take better jobs. Players go to places where they get better deals. Injuries happen. Draft picks suck. Which is pivots to my next topic, which is that where does that sound? What does that sound like? Coaches suck. Draft picks don't hit. Offensive line injuries. You name it. Weird culture. I mean, it's exactly what Justin Herbert has endured. And I mean, I'm not. This is what I had said in the beginning. It's great that you got Joe Alt. It's great that you had Joe Alt. You drafted Joe Alt 6. But offensive line injuries at times can be a bit of a domino effect. One guy goes down, another guy goes down, and all of a sudden, like, you look around and you're starting 6-round picks. That's exactly what's happening with the Chargers. And you could tell by the pace in which that they play. I mean, it comes down to, at the end of that first half against Washington, rather than just, take the ball at midfield, they seem to run some play where they try to block the punt, and the guy roughs. And next play, they throw it under the Jaden Daniels throws it over the top. It shifts that entire game. You have the Quentin Johnson fumble. It's like when you have injuries and there's a weak point, you might start to do too much. And that sucks. That sucks. Because you have to eventually getting to a point with Justin Herbert's career is like similar to we've said this with the Bengals. Like, are the Chargers wasting this guy's talent? Is this guy another Andrew Luck? Because the Chargers are up 10-0. They're rolling. They might have offensive line, and that fumble that just flipped everything, and it literally fell apart from them. Literally fell apart. It's a lot for Herbert to overcome. It's a hell of a lot for a guy like that to overcome. And yeah, they have Harbaugh. And yeah, do I have faith that they can get it right? Yeah. They play Miami this week. Miami is that 1:00 window game with the Chargers and Dolphins is a very interesting game. You have two teams that are coming off some pretty lows, some pretty low lows right there. Miami to an extent. I mean, we've been talking about Mike McDaniel being on the hot seat, especially after losing that lead to Carolina. It's now intensified. Is this a game? Is this a game where they fire? If they fire Mike McDaniel after a loss, because you have a Charger team, they're decimated. They're starting 6-round picks. I mean, this is where for the Chargers, this game has somewhat level of a significance. One, it's essentially this could be it for Mike McDaniels. And two, this is also important for the Chargers. You got to understand, for the Chargers, this is why they hired Harbaugh. This is why they did it. And this is why they pay Herbert. You can say, well, injuries, offensive line injuries. That's fine. But this is why you pay your big people the big money. So this is going to be an interesting game. This is not a this is one of those we might be looking at the Chargers of are they even going to make the playoffs? And we might be looking at Miami being is Mike McDaniel done? In other words, there's a whole lot to lose in this game and not a whole lot to gain from this. So I'm interested to see that matchup. In other news, like I've mentioned before, Jared Goff and the Lions. As probably a lot of people would have told you that if they took a step back and maybe went 8-9, I wouldn't have been surprised. Especially after that first week against Green Bay. Especially after that week. It would not surprise me if they had gone 8-9. But they don't look like they've missed a step. And the difference is we now understand, oh, Jared Goff is that dude. 100%. 100%. And we have to ask ourselves this question. Is that if we look at Goff's career, we can say, well, he had McVay. Well, he had McVay. Sure. But then he went to the Lions. And I remember in the beginning that they tried to bury him. And now look at the guy. And he weathered that storm. I don't think we really talk about it. In 21 and 22. He weathered that storm. We want to talk about Dan Campbell's ability to grind and to build the culture in Detroit, and Brad Holmes. But we forget that there's another aspect to it. It's Jared Goff. Let's not forget, we all give the credit to McVay. But before Goff got there and McVay, that organization was in a dumpster fire. To that last year in St. Louis, to that first year in LA, it was a dumpster fire. And they draft Goff, and of course Jeff Fisher, which running offenses from 1995. Like, yeah, like that clearly didn't work. But you can't tell me anywhere besides Jeff Fisher that Jared Goff hasn't worked. Maybe it's not necessarily the coach. Maybe it is more of Goff. Maybe he's more of the glue than we ever give him. We ever give credit. We ever give credit. And you know what? Like I was watching this on YouTube, and someone was like, "Well, would you consider Jared Goff to be? Would you consider Jared Goff to be a Hall of Famer?" I think to a degree. I think that I could really warm up to that. The job that they've done this thus far, they don't look like they've missed a beat. They're not sitting around being like the coordinator. They know they have talent. They know what they do well. That's the interesting thing about the Detroit offense is that they all know what they all know what they can do. And I would best describe that offense as harmonious. Goff knows what he is. He's not like a super mobile. He's probably one of like the few pure pocket passers we have left. You have a David Montgomery, more of a power back. You have Jahmyr Gibbs, who's definitely that dynamic back that comes out of the backfield. Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the best possession receivers we have in the game. Jameson Williams is a burner. It works. It all fits. All fits under that. Because you have a quarterback that knows what he is and knows what he isn't. And listen, at this point, we all like to, especially with the Micah Parsons trade. It's really easy to do this. Really easy to do this, where it's like, oh, this team, they made a huge mistake, or like, I remember sitting there thinking like, the Rams got Stafford, and the Lions got Jared Goff. Man, what a like, man, Detroit like damn, Detroit got you're thinking that Detroit got the worst guy. I don't know about that anymore. Of course, I would never suggest this because the Rams ultimately won the Super Bowl. But I mean, if you look at it in a similar light, before everyone, before anyone makes this, oh my God, this is a ridiculous claim. Before anyone says that, let's the Phillies another year, they haven't since that Cinderella run, they haven't been back to a World Series since 2022. And excuse me, sorry. They haven't been back. Bryce Harper's been with the team for 6 years. He left in January of that 2019. I believe so. And he goes to the Phillies. In that 2019 season, Washington won the World Series. Almost improbably. They do it after they let their franchise player go, which is there's very few examples in sports where that really occurs. That was kind of an incredible moment. An incredible moment in baseball, even though it was done by a franchise that has kind of been, it doesn't always get taken seriously a lot. Now, like we wouldn't suggest that the Nationals won that transaction. Letting go of Harper and having him sign with the Phillies, no one would suggest that. Well, the Nationals definitely got the better bargain of the deal, but they have the World Series. The thing that we are as Philly fans talking about is, oh well, it's another year. Like, is our championship window closing? It's important to guys like Bryce, to Schwarber. It's important to guys like that. But you wouldn't go and suggest that a Nationals team that it's since that Game 7 of that 2019 World Series has not even sniffed anywhere close to a playoff game. We wouldn't suggest that. So let's bring it back to the Rams and Stafford. They they they've they've won. They've won the Super Bowl. They have the trophy. But in terms of the direction that both of those franchises are going in now, I mean, this is probably it. If the Rams don't win a Super Bowl this year, it's probably it for Stafford and the Rams. And let's look at it for the Lions. I mean, Goff Goff has, for the most part, has been a very durable player. Sometimes it's like availability is the best thing that you could have as a player. He's available, and this isn't a situation where Ben Johnson leaves and they've taken a step back. Thus far, they don't look like they have stepped back whatsoever. Not even remotely have they taken a step back. So I mean, I don't know if it's as bold of a claim to say that Detroit's might have got the better end of this deal. It's possible. Because the Rams don't make a playoff run, a deep playoff run at the bare minimum. Stafford, I mean, he's done in LA. I mean, just look at what the Rams right now. They're very Puka Nacua reliant, whereas Detroit, that's not even remotely close. And it starts with Goff. You would say, well, that was all Ben Johnson, but it's the same level of production. Probably even better. Maybe that's a little bit too bold of a statement, but that offense doesn't seem like it's on its last legs. The Rams, sometimes you're like, well, if Stafford gets hurt, or if you get bounced in the wild card round, what does the future look like? Obviously you have McVay, and they did go through a mini transition after they won the Super Bowl in 2022. But outside of that 2021 year, if you go and you tell me who's got the better who got the better chunk of the pie here, would definitely be Detroit. Not only from a head-to-head a record standpoint, but just from Goff. I mean, notice how Goff, even with the Rams, he was pretty easy to build around. That's what you want, a guy that's pretty easy to build around. Because he knows what he is, he knows what he isn't. Not a super ego guy, a good leader, good distributor of the ball. Similar to our guy Baker Mayfield. Good distributor of the ball, Very easy to build around. I just don't know how you I just don't know how you look at the Rams and you say like, now, was it the right move for them to get rid of Goff for Stafford? Yes, it probably was. Similar to, yes, it was probably the right move for Washington to let Bryce Harper walk. Probably the right move. Probably was. But I would say that it's better Detroit because their trajectory looks much more brighter at this point than the Rams. The Rams are probably way too talented not to, at the very least, get in as a wild card. They're way too talented. But there is a little bit of iffiness when it comes to, hey, who is Stafford going to be here after a year? Probably not. Well, okay. Then what do we do? How long's McVay gonna stick around? At the end of the day, there were talks a couple years ago of like, hey, McVay might retire and go into TV. I mean, it's just per personality, certainly certainly suits in. So you don't. I mean, you don't really know. I mean, I I'm not here to suggest that. I'm not here to suggest that that both teams shouldn't have made a mistake. I don't think. I think both it worked out for both of them. But man, like I think if you're alliance team, an organization, you say, it's like we might have never been to a Super Bowl, but we have to really set the standard high. Uh, because they could be finding themselves in a Buffalo situation where they just keep getting close, close, and close, and years go by, and you're like, well, what the hell are we gonna do next? Uh, so this should be a good set of some games on Sunday. I know I'm looking forward to it. Um, you got Kansas City and Detroit. Uh, I listen. I'm not going to sit around here and suggest Kansas City is in trouble. I am not going to suggest that. Now, is it clear that they're taking a step back? Yes, it is very clear about it. Very, very clear. It's very clear. But that was a weird game on Monday night. Very bizarre. But, you know, I'm not going to suggest that they're going to go 8-9. They might go 10-7. They have very winnable games. And I think it's in the past couple of weeks with Kansas City is that at the end of the day, you still have Reed, you still have Mahomes, and there's still a fighting chance. That should be an interesting game. Um, one last thing, I was sold on. You know what? If you're a Cincinnati team, and if you can find a way to go like 5-6, Joe Burrow misses 11 games. He's out for 12 weeks, misses about 11. If he can go, if they can go 5-6, and they sit at like 7-6 late in the year, I don't think the season is done for Cincinnati. Well, now they're 2-3, and Jake Browning doesn't look like it's getting any better. That's why they signed Joe Flacco. Now, do I still believe that they have a shot? I, I, I don't know. I don't know. You're playing the Packers, and you could easily be 2-5 from a blink of an eye. But that sucks. That sucks because you know that Joe Burrow, all the offseason noise. I mean, it just becomes another season where he can't stay healthy. It's a shame. It really is a shame. Because we might be considering this guy a Dan Marino. Plays in that Super Bowl early in his career, and we say he'll be back. But he doesn't ever come back. Doesn't ever go back. It's a shame. So I just don't see it from Joe Flacco at this point. Like he took the Browns to the playoffs that year, and I mean maybe he can snag you a game here and there, but if Cincinnati is 5-8 late in the year, what's the point of putting Burrow back in there? Unless he feels like he really needs to play. Because at that point, I mean, who knows, right? You could be 5-8, but you're going to tell a guy that's been out for 90 days, oh, we need 4 wins in a row, come back and win us 4 games in a row. It's not likely. So to even have a prayer's chance in hell, you'd have to win at least like 3 more games. And Baltimore is looking like it's going in the tank. You play the Browns once more. Even in their division, I'm not even sold on Pittsburgh. Not sold on Rodgers at this point of his career, although he's played well. So maybe you could maybe muscle out a couple wins here and there. But what's the point of bringing Joe Burrow back if you're 5-8 and you're asking him, a guy that's came off an injury, win 4 straight? Just not. I just don't know if it's in the cards, man. I just don't know. So, all right, let's get out of here. Thank you for a great show. Be sure to hit like and subscribe to the Hardcore Sports Network for this show and the other great shows that are on this channel. Thank you again. It's been real. Thank you for tuning into the Solution Breakdown. See you next week.